компьютер рекорд olsun. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, it's preparing.
Onu hansı proqramdan eləyirsən?
So we're live. Okay.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. It's great to see all of you in a great rainy evening. Today we have our next Startup Grind Fireside Chat. Before we will go to the Startup Grind session, I would like to give you some information about a Startup Grind. So the Startup Grind is the world's largest community of startups, founders, innovators, and creators. We bring like-minded, diverse individuals together to connect, learn, teach, help, build, and belong. We do this daily through our local events, flagship conferences, startup program partnerships, and online media, collectively reaching over the 3.5 million individuals worldwide. The most important thing for us is to have values. We believe in making friends, not contacts. We believe in giving, not taking. We believe in helping others before helping yourself. Today we have an amazing person. I have been knowing him for many, many years, but unfortunately he doesn't know about me, but hopefully we're gonna get acquainted with each other. And today we have Mahammad Kekalov, founder of Kekalove Inclusive Fashion. And Kekalove, how are you, Mahammad? How is it going?
I'm very good, Zawar. Thank you for the invitation. And thanks for the introduction.
You're welcome. So first of all, it will be very great actually to know about you, about, give me some information about yourself, about what you do generally, and what Kekalove is.
Well, as you said, I'm Mahammad. I'm 19 years old. I'm a student at Azerbaijan State University of Economics, currently on my third year, getting a degree in business administration. And for the past 1.5, 2 years, I've been working for Kekalove Adaptive Fashion, which is a startup I founded with my friends that does clothing specifically for persons with disabilities. I have a grandmother who has a visual disability. She lost her sight when I was just a little baby, and so growing up with her, I witnessed a lot of her difficulties getting around in life. So on my first year of business school, I founded Kekalove with the hope to actually help persons with disabilities in Azerbaijan and worldwide. We're a team of 5 people. 3 of us, me and 2 fashion designers, are working full-time on creating cool new products. I do more of a product management job, even though I don't get involved with the fashion side of everything, the more interesting creative side. I speak with a lot of customers. I speak with a lot of the industry players to actually create functional and useful products that our users will like and use and buy.
Perfect. Great, amazing. Actually, what you're doing is amazing. And but one thing is really clear that we're always talking about the importance of having a very strong why. You just said about that and of your business, but I want you to just elaborate on that. The mission that drives your activities. How would you describe yours?
Well, as I said, I grew up with my grandmother, and when I was growing up with her, I'd see her struggle with clothing. I'd sit across the room with her, and I'd watch her do things that I was very interested in understanding how her disability affected her life, and how she was adapting her life without being able to see whatever is going on. And clothing was one of them. She was always having a lot of trouble putting clothing on. It's usually be my mom that would go there and help her in the morning and in the evening, taking care of her and helping her dress up. But sometimes when my mom was not around, she'd try to do things herself. And I'd see her, try to to put on a jacket and find where the hand goes. But because she doesn't see, she wouldn't be able to dress up. So that was something that I noticed, and as time went on, and when I first had the idea, I actually realized how important this would be for not just my grandmother, but also millions of persons with disabilities worldwide who have some kind of disability, and it affects their lives. The mission of Kekalove Adaptive is to enable persons with disabilities through fashion, through comfortable clothing, to realize and achieve their best selves. Because if you're not dressed up in clothing that you feel comfortable with and that you actually like, you're not going to have the satisfaction, the kind of satisfaction that you would need to be successful in life. That's what we believe in.
Great. And, we read on your blog, that people have tried to do adaptive fashion in the past, and it's even in 1960s, 70s. But for those who are not familiar with the term, how would you define adaptive fashion and what is important for people?
Yeah, as per the readers of blog, that makes just the two of us, I think. If we're talking about the history of adaptive fashion, we can go back to as early as the First World War, where the veterans of this war would come back to their home countries, to Great Britain and the United States, and they would have the wounds, the injuries from the war. And the clothing for them would be adapted towards their needs. Back then, the mentality was different. It was not adapted just so they would live a more comfortable life and they would be more included in the society, but rather to show off that patriotic view of, I lost my arm in the battle, so I'm a patriotic person, or I lost my leg. All these different things would have different connotations. In the US, they would see beggars on the street. The veterans would come back from the army. They wouldn't have a leg and they wouldn't be able to work, and they'll start begging. And so they started adapting pants to leg prostheses so that they wouldn't look much like a beggar. On the other hand, when you lost your hand, it would mean something that you can feel proud of. So the clothing would be adapted to that. But as time went on, and the disability inclusion and rights movement expanded, more and more people started understanding it. And towards the middle and towards the end of last century, we saw individual efforts from people who had disability themselves, any kind of disability, or their loved ones had, tried to come up with creative solutions to their clothing problems. And because back then the movement was not as big, and the acceptance of the rights of persons with disabilities, and this whole inclusion movement, it was very it was in its early stages back then. They couldn't find the right market and right target group then, but now today, 21st century, we've found it. We're working on it. But that was when the when it started. We ask very simple questions like, how does someone in a wheelchair put on a pair of pants? And we try to go through that journey and try to understand how that works. And we speak to a lot of wheelchair users and try to understand how they put on that clothing, and draw the lines between those dots and come up with clothing that's going to be functional for them.
Amazing.
And
yeah. So just very internationally, you said about like how generally pattern changed and how the model, how the perception completely changed. But my question would be, what do you think? Why the changed? What's happening in the people's mind? Why this trend happening nowadays? What exactly changed so people understood actually they have to shift from this idea, and they have to really look for something that will be very comfortable for them, and so they can put on, and at the same time be confident with their own thing that they have now on their body.
I think the real reason why the perception changes is because more and more persons with disabilities started speaking up and started going forward with their bodies, and started telling people that it's okay to have a disability, and life goes on, and it's a normal thing, a part of the life. And many thanks to all the brave people that were able to break all the stereotypes, the movement grew, and more people who didn't have a disability started to really understand that it's basically just another characteristic someone gained, and not as dreadful many people think it is. And going back to the importance of adaptive clothing and the effect it has, there is a research done by the Occupational Health and Safety Organization in British Columbia. They researched, they did an experiment with wheelchair users and their caretakers back in 2003, and they gave them adapted and non-adapted clothing just to see how much time and energy they spent. And both the users of the clothing and the caretakers both reported that using adaptive clothing reduced the time spent on the dressing up process by half, by more than 50%. And also the energy spent during this process, during dressing up, by equally as much. So that's very inspiring results, actually.
Yeah, right. You know, especially when I think just, you know, when you're talking about like Second World War, it just came, this interesting idea that came to my mind, and especially what in the background what's happening nowadays in Azerbaijan, especially, you know, like we won the war. We're kind of, you know, I think there's many horizons opening nowadays, especially for your for your fashion, for your inclusive fashion, adaptive fashion. And I think that nowadays we have many people who just gonna have, you know, these challenges, and probably there will be great fit for them too, to, you know, to experience what you're offering. And, you know, I just want to go back to our questions. Well, you know, last winter you exhibited your clothing within your Ras Peripheral Expansion exhibition, which had a theme of face of life that are given least attention to, neglected, or overlooked. What trends do you see in this industry? I mean, would you say that there's been a positive shift in general in terms of inclusion of persons with disabilities for businesses?
I would say yes. Back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, for the very first time at a Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week in Moscow, there was an adaptive fashion brand from Russia who exhibited their clothing. And after how successful that went in Moscow, I think the whole Fashion Week had this rule to include persons with disabilities in all the fashion weeks across the world, in New York and LA and Tbilisi, and as we have in Baku. So that was something very, you know, a moving point, turning point in the industry. And as time went on, and as more and more persons with disabilities were moving forward with their activism, we started to see rise of adaptive fashion brands, you know, such as ours and many others in different countries. And when I say many others, it's just only a handful of brands when you're comparing to the big fashion industry. So even though there is still a very large room for improvement, we do see that, you know, this adaptive fashion is just gaining momentum. By 2023, if I remember correctly, the whole market is going to be worth by 350 billion USD. The whole adaptive fashion market, and it's a large market cap for just a handful of players. And in Azerbaijan too, in the recent weeks, I saw some of my friends who had a disability get jobs in the private sector. So I would say more and more people are moving towards business inclusion and including persons with disabilities in their operations and in their products and in their offices and processes. I think there is also this small factor that when you employ a certain number of persons with disabilities, you get exemption from some taxes, and that especially for big organizations, it means a lot to not have to pay that tax. Sure. I don't think many people know about that.
Yeah, and during those performances, some part of your potential customers, Jonas, were revealed in a way the female actor in a wheelchair was taking off her dress, which brings me to my next question. So, because to us was a very good example of how founders engage with their users to create the best solution. So, how do you discover and assess people's needs when designing your products generally?
Yes, that's actually a very integral part of what we do at Kekalove and how the adaptive fashion business is generally done. Because we don't have a disability, we can't really understand how that affects our lives. And given each disability is specific and and it depends on the individual with the disability. It's important to speak to them and understand their needs. What we do is basically what every other adaptive fashion brand in the world should do, and it's totally different from traditional fashion. Is that we first need to speak to the people, the segment that we're targeting with a certain collection. If it's wheelchair users, or if they're people with arm or leg prostheses, or many other disabilities. And once we speak to them and identify their needs and try to see how the clothing, how the journey is for them, we identify the pain points. I'll give you an example. Pants for wheelchair users. Our coming collection is for wheelchair users, and we focused a lot on pants. And I spoke to a lot of wheelchair users, and I asked about how pants, different kinds of pants, affect them. And I collected all the data with my designers, and then we ran through that data, and we identified what's there good for them and what's not good for them. And then we removed all of that, and we changed the structure of the whole pant. And then we go to the tailor, and we try to explain to the tailor what we want. And then once she creates that particular piece, we go back to persons with disabilities, to our initial focus group, and ask them to wear that particular piece, and spend a day or two in that, so that we can understand how that, if that's better, if that's worse, and if it's worse, why is it, so we can go back and change. And we do this trial and error with the experts. We approach persons with disabilities not as objects, but as experts who know the problem better than we do, and who can help us. And then they're involved, as I said, in every step of the process. At the end of the UN, I think, declaration on the rights of persons with disabilities, they say nothing for us without us. So that's exactly what we do. We don't leave them out of any process, because basically what we create is for persons with disabilities, and we should know if it's going to be a functional product, if it's going to be something they need before we roll it out, and maybe not dump all that money into something that's not going to work out eventually.
Yeah, right. I really like your idea about it, because I always try to, follow this rule, because you have to co-create. So the co-creation is very important, actually, for many people, especially when you just do your start, or your work on your startup. It's a great tool for validation when you, get, the primary data from people who just experienced this challenge, and they know exactly what they want. And I really love the moment that you understand that it's not our place to talk about them. It's not our place to speak up. Maybe we have to just listen. There needs to be the moment when you understand that co-creation is very important, when they just also put kind of heart, and I would say additional, emotion in this clothes, in this, in this product. That's I think very important. I think it's a fashion of heart. And I think it's really greatly done. And I do believe that actually going to be quite popular in Azerbaijan, and also beyond, because it's not just social thing, but it's emotional moment. And I think that's really amazing that people will understand, and will just get it very serious, and will do very significant steps to generally to spread this information, to spread, this idea and this trend down the country and other societies, for sure. But when we talk about the society, when we talk about, social impact, and how you want to, impact the world, impact the people, it's sometimes we have misconceptions here in Azerbaijan, and also in many places, actually. So that's what my next question would be. What would you say are the biggest misconceptions about business with social impact, especially that they have focus on customers with disabilities? Because nowadays we have this kind of challenge, and I know, because I'm started in this, and I just hearing this kind of things, and to be honest, I'm not that good. It's quite disgusting, but we have to hear that. And it's not all about tech. It's all about solution. It's all about impact.
Yes, that's actually a very good point you brought up. Leaving all the ableist and discriminative rhetoric aside, because we know that's stinky. There's also a bunch of other communities that actually want to approach this issue in a more non-discriminative way, but then in the end,
Yeah.
they still end up hurting the community and the whole rhetoric. The most important thing, a common thing I get is that our products are very expensive. I recently put out this dress for Black Friday sale for 89 manats, and if you've ever passed that Zara store near McDonald's, you see all the people lined up for the dresses, but then they sell dresses for much more expensive than 89 manats. But when I put it out, people come to me and say this is expensive price, because they say persons with disabilities are not going to be able to pay for it,
Yeah.
which is not true. It's very ableist to think that persons with disabilities are poor and all they have to care is their health, and then they spend all this money on different clothing. I've done a lot of customer discovery, and when I speak to persons with disabilities, especially wheelchair users, I see how financially different backgrounds they're coming from. I'm talking to these people, to this lady who had, who claimed to have around 25 dresses, and she was shopping from Amazon. And then there was this another man who only had one winter jacket, because he wasn't really getting out of home as much. So there's all this wide spectrum of financial background they're coming from. And it's very wrong. It's a wrong misconception to just assume that all of them are poor and all of them don't want to spend money on clothing. That's one thing. And second is, I think it's the deal with a lot of other social businesses and social enterprises, is that many people think it's a charity, that the clothing should be cheap, if not it's free. We shouldn't really look for profits, and we shouldn't really price it in a way that it's gonna, we're gonna take some money from there and survive, basically. Yes, we try to be affordable and accessible, but there's all this extra effort that is put into the creation of adaptive clothing. I just explained all that validation phases we go, and it's all resources, it's all time and energy, and that just translates into money when we price our products. I think for other businesses too, they think social businesses, they shouldn't be, they shouldn't have 90 dresses, even with discounts.
Well, we live in 21st century, actually. We can't think about, we live in 21st century, and it's really not relevant to think about a business if you don't think about a social impact. Come on. It's not that. Come on, you can't be only economically, targeted. You have to think also about economical part of this thing too. But you have to think about availability for sure. You have to think about desirability. But at the same time, you have to think about a social impact too, about a strategy, about your social impact. You can't think only about this. And that's why I think that it doesn't matter actually your startup, your just business or social entrepreneur. It doesn't mean actually the most important thing generally here is to have this social impact, this social line that will impact people. Because at the end of the day, actually, you're working for people, and you're right about inequalities. You're right about that, because generally you have completely different target. But it doesn't mean actually they're poor. It doesn't mean actually they can't buy these kind of things. And it's also about a social business. We're not talking about a charity. You're right about that. We're talking about a sustainable business. In order to be sustainable, you also have to earn money. You also have to be financially stable in order to give a spark. Give. I would say the stream of a new fashion, the stream of a new clothes and stuff, and you can't be just limited. But I think it's kind of a limitation. Even some people kind of believe that they're right, and they believe that they on this path, and they're on the path to do kind of social impact, and they think about disability. But at the same time, by being uneducated and illiterate about how you should treat people with disability, and what you should do, what you shouldn't do, how you can should you bridge this rule or not, and what the line, the red line that you can bridge or not. So if people, it's very, very true, because we also with Michael actually have a very interesting online development platform called Scaling, and we just do in background what's happened actually in the United States, with the Black Lives Matter movement. We understood that actually we have to help them, but we don't want to teach them how they should do. We just want to listen them. Just speak up, tell us what we have to do, how we can help you. Not just, we don't know how we can help you, because they know exactly what they're looking for. They know exactly what they're targeting and hunting for. That's exactly. So I think there's a moment when you co-create, when you understand that, when you just, don't, it's amazing thing to have empathy. It's amazing thing to walk someone's shoes, but it's not amazing thing to believe that you know everything, because we are privileged. we are privileged and we can't think about these people.
Mm-hmm,
We can't
mm-hmm.
think about the challenges. It's going to be very, very, very secondary data. We have to just ask from people and get this primary data that will reveal us all the secrets or all the things that actually we have to follow. And there's also interesting for me. It's very interesting actually to know about your business generally, about the specifics. Could you tell
Mm-hmm,
about
mm-hmm.
what you can tell about your team? Are they engineers, designers, or local? Do you manufacture everything here in Azerbaijan, in Baku, or?
Yes, we have a very nice team. I'm working closely, as I said, with the two fashion designers, Sabina Sahib and Rashida Ali. They're very experienced fashion designers in Baku, and when I first approached them with this idea to come up with clothing designs for persons with disabilities, since day one they've been with me, and in this process now we're about to launch I would say our first fully adaptive collection for wheelchair users for next year's summer spring, but we're going to launch it, I think, next month. Because of the COVID situation, supply and production lines have been distorted for a little while, but we're back on track and we're working very hard. So, and apart from my two fashion designers, there's also an IT guy who works with us, Mahammad Kekalov, and then we have a sales manager, Turan Jabbarlu, who's working with us to actually find the right sales channels and market it correctly. But that's a thing for I would say tomorrow that we think.
You already
But
asked my
right
next
now we're
question, generally. You already asked my next question about the mentors.
yes. Uh, and we produce everything in Baku. We're working with a very beautiful, very small, but sweet atelier in Razin area. It's a little far from the city, especially now. It's a little hard to get there and come back. But right now, I would say the production is going there. And next week, I'm going to be able to go and see the first of our prototypes and get back to my users and to the validation stage.
That's brilliant. That's splendid. Okay, so there's one saying, and everyone knows that no man is warrior in the field alone, and probably you had
Mm-hmm.
amazing people throughout this journey. People who advised you, people who mentored you, people who just supported you, mentally. Can you give me some information about them? And if so, what has been the best and worst advice you have received so far about managing Kekalove?
Yes. Well, I spoke to a lot of people about this business, people in the field of fashion, people in the field of disability inclusion in Azerbaijan, outside Azerbaijan. My two great mentors were when I was still a Yunus Youth fellow. Uh, I think it ended at the end of September. I was working with two people from Citigroup. One was based in New York, and the other one was based in Hong Kong. Leonard Howe and Shirley Sia. We were working with them developing the business model. And after I became the grand champion of Creative Sprak Challenge, I was assigned another mentor from London Metropolitan University, Simon Butt. And currently our mentorship sessions are going with Simon. Simon is helping me with the product development, as I mentioned, and again, find the right sales channels to reach my customers. But other than that, I've spoken to other adaptive fashion pioneers in the world who've had a lot of experience from the United States, Mindishir, and from Russia, Yanina Urusova. I was just on the phone with her yesterday. There's a lot of other people that I can mention who helps me during this business. And when it comes to the advice, I would say the best advice is that is to find the real the financial model of this project, because when I also first started, I wasn't really sure, should this be a social project, should this be a business, and my mentors were there to help me to kind of wake me up and say, Muhammad, you need to make money. So uh, uh, that was, I would say, the best advice I received. And not to mention the fact that I was told by other designers, other adaptive fashion designers, how this business works, how I should do the validation and speak to them. But I already touched upon that. But when it comes to the worst advice, I think that would be that was it in itself a very ableist thing that I received. At the time, I didn't understand how ableist and how wrong it was. So I went on with that. In the early days of our business, I was speaking to a fashion designer, a theatrical fashion designer who does clothing for theaters and operas in Baku. And he has experience with working with persons with disabilities. And he told me that if you want to create clothing for persons with disabilities, you should work with the top-notch, the state-of-the-art theatrical tailors who know, the deep specifics of what they're doing, so that they're not going to have any problems creating this clothing for them. And I thought that was true, but they're expensive to work with, they're very hard to find, and they're not as reliable because they have a lot of things on their plate. But I ended up not following that advice and working with this with another tailor who was not a theatrical tailor, who didn't have a master's degree in fashion construction, but in the end she ended up doing a very good job for our business. And that's when I understood that that advice was just not as useful as I thought it was. I think the real reason why he told me that I had to work with this really skilled, let's say, tailors, was because deep down in his mind he was also ableist, and he didn't really understand. He thought that if these are persons with disabilities, then you need to work with people who really know their stuff, so that because it must be hard, because it must be very hard to create something for them. I think that was his approach, which is absolutely wrong.
Yeah. So we always talk about beachhead strategy. We always talk about like you have to capture, like start with one place and just go global. So my question is going to be about being international and being global. So, and you're about to launch your online store, and are these plans to go international, even global?
Yes, when we're looking at the Azerbaijani market, we see it's small. There are around 600,000 persons with disabilities in Azerbaijan, and we break it down into the segments that we can really target. It comes down to a small group, and if we're successful, it's enough to get successful to gain some traction in here. But when we're talking about scaling up and having a real positive impact on the world, we must go global. We must go, look at other countries with much larger populations, but also we need to understand how persons with disabilities live lives in different countries. They live a different life. They have a different atmosphere in Turkey, different in Russia, different in Sweden, and different in the United States. But basically, once we're about to launch the store, once all the pieces of the collection are out and out there, I'll just put them on the store, and we'll pick, I think, one or two of them to mass produce, so that we can try try to sell all of them by the end of this next year. And if all goes well, we're gonna keep working with the Azerbaijani customer. But the main problem with Azerbaijani customers is that they're not very they're not out there. You don't see them walking on the streets. You don't see them going to places. Most of them, because of the infrastructure problem, and many others, don't go out. But they still shop. They still wear. They still live a life. So they need to wear clothing, and they have all the disposable income that they can spend on adaptive clothing. So I have hopes that I'll be able to find the right channels to reach them and actually sell to them.
Perfect. Amazing. What would you advise to anyone who wants to make disruptive change? That's going to be something interesting.
Yes, as someone who wants to make disruptive change myself, I'd first really recommend to understand the kind of change that we're seeking. We need to know what we're going after and how the change process is going to work. We need to really understand the implications and the consequences of the actions we're taking today. I was speaking with a trainer who was visiting from the United Kingdom. He was a social activist, and he told me that doing work and doing projects and activities is like the growing of hair. You do something today, and you don't, if you cut your hair and then you don't come back the next day and see it all growing back, some time passes, and then you see it's time for a haircut again. And it's similar to the project. It's similar to doing work, that you do something today, and then tomorrow and the day after, and then one day you come back and you see the change you've created with other actors, of course. So it takes some time, it takes some patience, and it takes some persistence. But also you need to really understand what kind of consequences your actions that you take today will have. How that hair is going to grow, so to speak. And I think, as Simon Sinek mentioned in one of his famous TED speeches, that New Yorkers got together at the end of 1800s. to discuss about the future of New York City, and all of them said there would be no New York City in 100 years because there would be a lot of horses and the city infrastructure couldn't hold the horses, and by the time the city would reach a certain population and the horse number would increase and the horse waste would just destroy the city. But then Henry Ford happened, so the cars started coming around. They couldn't foresee that cars would come and horses would disappear. We don't see any horses in New York City today, except for in the Central Park. So that was the kind of thing that we should be able to predict, at least have in our minds, because the activities you do today and with the goal, something else might happen, and then your goal might be irrelevant. So that doesn't mean you should just put all your efforts and all your impact in the trash can.
I think that this is why it's very international for people to watch us, and I think that they're going to be kind of spark for them to just to start. Always in these days especially, I'm kind of into the Princess Diana's life, and I was hearing, I was listening her about like the challenges that she had actually in the palace and stuff, and this is the one word that I really liked, and I do believe that converting actually in our context, you're really entrepreneur of hearts, and I'm really, really happy to know you. And I do believe that Azerbaijan should be proud of you, that you really have done a great job for people, and you really impacted a lot. And I just want to conclude our session, and I want you to give some words about like last word that just coming from your from your heart. Just make them escape from your lips.
Thank you so much for all the kind words, and thanks for the invitation. I really like the questions. I think they were on point, and they just uncovered everything I really wanted to say. So thanks a lot for that, and it's an honor to be here and have the chance to interact with you, and looking forward to many more like this.
Thank you very much. And, thank you very much who watched us. And don't forget to subscribe. At the same time, we have a YouTube channel. Same time, we have a Facebook channel. Like our Facebook channel, also share with your friends. If you have a question, also, message us. We'll be very happy actually to answer. Yeah, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.